Hey there, it's Tank Girl, and this here is the Moto G for 2014. You know, last year's Moto G was one of my favorite phones because at the price point, you just couldn't go wrong. And so what Motorola did this year is they just made it bigger and just improved pretty much everything about it for the same price. So you really still can't go wrong with the Moto G. So whether you pick last year's Moto G or this year's Moto G, you're getting fantastic phones. The only difference primarily is with the camera and the display. The display is much larger. Instead of a 4.5-inch 720p display, we now have a 5-inch 720p display. Also IPS, and it's a little dim, unfortunately. I find that the auto setting on this phone has been problematic for me. It's too dim in low light. In auto mode, I have to crank the brightness up. When I use it, the colors look a little dull because of it. Let me illustrate this by going here in brightness and turning off the auto mode, and immediately you can see how much better this phone looks. What else is there to say about this phone? Well, it's Snapdragon 400, 1 gig of RAM. That hasn't changed. Quad-core Snapdragon 400, so it's the good one. Same CPU as last year. Performance seems to be just as great. Really, unless you're playing some hardcore games, you know, the Snapdragon 400 is just a fantastic processor for running Android on a device that's you know, price sensitive, and they've done a really good job with that. The biggest change is the size. This is a much larger phone because of its larger display, and you do lose some of the pixel density because it's still only a 720p display. That's a ½ inch bigger, so that's a huge difference right there, right? Now, in the back, this is, as I said, very similar actually to last year's Moto X that I had, the custom-made purple Moto X. They gave me a phone with a pink back cover. I love it myself, but I'm just telling you, this just kind of happened randomly. Maybe they know me well. As you can see, very similar design to last year's Moto X with the dimple, flash, main camera. The big difference this year with this Moto G compared to last year's Moto G is the camera. Instead of a 5 megapixel f/2.4 sensor, it's a 8 megapixel f/2.0 sensor. Now, if you know anything about photography, this means this camera can capture much more light in low light and has better resolution, so you can zoom in more on your pictures, and the results are really significant. The camera on last year's Moto G was passable. I mean, you could live with it because the phone was so good and so affordable, but this year they've really remedied this. I think this camera is perfectly usable. Really no complaints. Of course, there's no OIS, but what do you expect? This is a mid-range phone at an incredible price, right? You have a headphone jack up here with a secondary microphone. On the right hand side you have the power lock key and a volume rocker, of course, and on the bottom here you have a micro USB charge and data port, obviously. Nothing here on the left side. In the back, the 8 megapixel camera, LED flash, the little Motorola dimple, so you can put your finger back there when you're talking. Feels good. But the big difference is in the front. You get the sensors in front facing camera, of course, but you have two slits here for speakers, as you can see, bottom and top, and it's very much similar to HTC's design on most of their recent phones, what they call the boom sound. This is a great stereo set of speakers. This becomes your earpiece when you're talking, but these are both activated together when you're listening to music, and it sounds great. It's a big improvement. The Moto X 2014 has the same layout, but doesn't actually have stereo speakers. It's got the earpiece up there and just a mono speaker at the bottom, and I'm not quite sure why they did this. This is a better entertainment device as such. Now, to be clear, this does not have LTE. There was a more version of the Moto G with LTE last year, and this year there will be probably as well, but this is the generic HSPA Plus version. I'm on AT&T here, and you can see that it's HSPA Plus. This is pretty much almost a Nexus type of experience. I just love it. Uncontaminated by carriers and the manufacturer. There's a few apps on here that are Moto-centric apps, but that's basically it. So all in all, this is a great device. Great improvement over last year. By the display size, it makes it a little more easy to type on. The camera is just a big improvement. Battery is the same. It's the 2070 milliamp hour. It's perfectly adequate. It's not a record breaker, but it'll last you a full day. So here's last year's Moto G. And as you can see, there's a huge size difference here. 4.5-inch 720p versus 5-inch 720p. And of course you lose pixel density, but what you do gain is more to look at. In terms of feeling in your hand, they're very similar, but this is definitely more comfortable, the smaller phone. So, the question you have to ask yourself is, do you want smaller or do you want bigger? And if you do want smaller, you have to live with a lesser camera this year. That's basically it. This is also only an HSPA Plus version. If I flip them over, you can see the similarities. It's uncanny. You've got, other than the speaker being gone that's on this side here, you can peel this off from the bottom. Both of them have this layout. Inside is a micro SIM, same as last year. However, there's one big improvement this year. This has a micro SD card slot, which the Moto X last year did not have. So you can expand it. So in addition to a better camera, you get expansion for storage. And to me, that's pretty significant. It feels and looks a little thinner, but a lot of it has to do with the edges being more beveled on the sides. And of course, the size overall of the phone makes it feel thinner, but it's about the same thickness. Now let's compare it to the Moto X for this year, the 2014 edition. And as you can see, it's a gorgeous display, 5.2 inches, 1080p versus 5 inches, 720p. Again, you get what you pay for here. This is a huge price difference between these two devices. But you do get the stereo speakers that, even though they look like they're stereo, are not on the Moto X. And if you flip them over, you can see a lot of similarities again. But you notice that this phone is a little taller and a bit narrower, the Moto G, than the Moto X this year. And of course, no metal here, plastic all around, whereas the Moto X 2014, it has a metal frame, which is beautiful. So thickness, here you go. The Moto X is a little bit thinner overall, and of course has much thinner edge, so it will feel thinner and look thinner. And that's really that. Let's quickly compare this phone to another 5-inch device that I really love that has a stock version of Android installed, and that's the Nexus 5. This is my daily driver, and again, both displays are identical in size. Of course, this is running Lollipop. The Moto G 2014 is starting to get Lollipop updates, so it shouldn't be much longer. Again, price-wise, it's still more expensive to buy Nexus 5, even though it's probably going to disappear soon. And of course, you get LT, you get OIS on the camera, you get a Snapdragon 800, but size-wise, they're not that different, which is really interesting. So if I flip them over now, the design in the back is, obviously different. Both are 8 megapixels, but remember that the Nexus 5 has optical image stabilization. That makes a big difference. And then if I stack them together, it's hard to compare because of these the tapered edges on the Moto G, but the Moto G is a little thicker, of course. So that's it about the Moto G for 2014. It was a great buy in 2013, one of my favorite phones of last year, and it still is one of my favorite phones this year in 2014. Still a great buy. You get a better camera, you get micro SD expansion, the same awesome general platform processor, and the screen is, yes and no. Yeah, it's bigger, but you get a bit less pixel density because of it and a bigger phone. Some people might not like that, but I think, honestly, it's worth the upgrade. If you don't have a 2013 model yet, it's definitely something you should consider, especially with this almost stock flavor of Android. So that's my Moto G 2014 review. I've had this phone for a couple of months now, and I've been using it, and I really like it a lot. Follow me on Twitter. I'm Tankgirl, TNKGRL on Twitter. I'm also at tankgirl.com, TNKGRL.com. That's my blog and this YouTube channel. Please like my videos, subscribe to my feed, and stay tuned. I've got a whole bunch more videos coming your way. All right, that's it for now. I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.